It all started the way disaster usually does, quiet and easily dismissed. Just a regular Wednesday, coming back from the lumberyard, truck loaded up with wood and sealant for the small off-grid cabin I'd been dreaming of for years. My land, my sanctuary, was a quiet 7-acre slice of forest, bordering the meticulously groomed HOA-controlled kingdom of Cedar Creek Estates. No mailboxes, no curtains, and most importantly, no self-appointed royalty telling me what shade of beige my life should be. I'd owned the plot Parcel 77 for over 5 years. It was my escape hatch, my little piece of the wild where I could park my old travel trailer, light a fire, crack a beer, and just breathe. But as my tires crunched onto the dirt path that day, something was immediately, violently wrong. The gravel I'd laid down last season was heavily compacted, scored by deep recent tire tracks, and then I saw it. Dead center on my lot, where my hammock usually hung, was an enormous, ugly construction-grade shipping container. Rusted orange, zip-tied with a sign, site storage, Cedar Creek Wellness Initiative, and right next to it, rebar was poking out of a freshly poured concrete slab. My heart stopped, then started hammering with pure, blinding rage. My land, my private, tax-paying, legally titled land, had been violated. No call, no lease, no notice. They just rolled right in and started pouring concrete like they were building a community dog park. A white Ford F-250 pulled up a minute later, carrying 2 guys in neon vests. The foreman, a scrawny dude with a clipboard, didn't even drop his cigarette when I introduced myself. "I own this property," I said, my voice dangerously level. His smirk died instantly. He mumbled something about orders from the Cedar Creek Development Board and how the land had been transferred to the Initiative for Public Use. I just stared at him. "Oh, it was it? Well, you can tell the Development Board that transfer is called trespassing, and you stop all work right now." He didn't argue much, just packed up his boys and left the container there, locked and mocking me. Back home, I confirmed the obvious. My title was immaculate. Then I made the call and the smugness started dripping through the phone line. "Ah, Parcel 77, the HOA assistant chirped. "Yes, we've been discussing that with city planning. Our community greenway expansion." I nearly swallowed the phone. "That's my land." "It is not a greenway, it's my private deed." And that's when I got the name, Ms. Penelope Shaw, president of Cedar Creek, and of course her name was basically Karen. I didn't sleep, fueled by a corrosive mix of fury and disbelief. The next morning I drove out, tore down the flimsy Future Community Center sign they'd hammered into the dirt, and marched straight to Penelope Shaw's converted clubhouse office. She was wearing a cream-colored power suit, and the kind of patronizing smile that belonged on a bad self-help book cover. "You must be Mr. Jensen," she said without getting up. Such drama. I slammed my property map onto her lacquered desk. "Cut the act. You're building on my land. This is my deed. You have zero jurisdiction." She actually chuckled, a high tinkling sound. "Mr. Jensen, there's been some confusion. Our understanding, based on talks with the county, is that the land was unclaimed or improperly titled. And our non-profit, the Initiative, merely acted on an opportunity." "You created that non-profit," I snapped, pointing at the paperwork I'd printed out. "It's registered to your home address." The smile flickered, a tiny crack in the porcelain. I'd hit a nerve. She recovered instantly, calling it a miscommunication based on outdated parcel documentation. Then came the punchline. She slid a single contract across the desk. $15,000, she purred, paid by the association in exchange for a full release of Parcel 77. No hassle, no litigation. It's a generous offer for land that was, let's face it, just sitting there. I felt the blood rush to my head. "Let me get this straight," I said slowly, making sure every word was recorded in my memory. "You forge a donation, start building on my land, smear me to the county, and now you want to buy your way out of felony trespassing with a lowball bribe?" She only tilted her head slightly. "We'd simply like to resolve this, Mr. Jensen, for the community." I took the offer sheet and only the sheet and walked out. I burned it later that night next to my trailer. The war had officially begun. I reinforced the drive with a steel chain and 3 motion-triggered cams. The counter-harassment was immediate. The chain was cut. I found online forum posts calling me a selfish land hoarder and I started receiving code enforcement complaints about my trailer being an abandoned structure and my fire pit a fire risk. They were weaponizing the bureaucracy I'd tried so hard to escape. That's when I pulled the move I now call the Trojan sheep. My friend, Chris, who hated the HOA more than anyone and was constantly fighting fines over the color of his shutters, agreed to help. I registered myself as a temporary resident at his address under a pseudonym Mark Sterling. The irony of having to join this hellscape to fight it wasn't lost on us. Wednesday night I walked into the Cedar Creek Community Hall. Beige walls, grey cookies, looking like the perfect new resident, and sat down at the monthly HOA meeting. Penelope Shaw was there, immaculate in a sapphire blouse running the show. The meeting was a blur of mailbox violations until they hit item 6, Cedar Creek Wellness Initiative update. She threw up a satellite map with my parcel 77 smack in the center, labeled Future Community Hub. She talked about fitness classes, senior workshops, and allocating $85,000 from the Emergency Reserve Fund for groundwork. When someone asked if the land was legally secured, she gave that condescending giggle. Legal finalization is in progress, just a formality. The previous owner's documentation is, shall we say, outdated. I just nodded, smiling politely, recording every single syllable. I left with the recording and an immediate realization they weren't just incompetent, they were maliciously fraudulent. I mailed the audio to my attorney, Sandra, with the note, nuclear option. They struck again on Saturday dawn. The flatbed was back, along with a cement mixer and a crew, already carving out a new foundation. They handed the sheriff, whom I'd called immediately, a copy of a forged lease bearing my name, supposedly notarized 2 days prior. The sheriff's deputy was apologetic but legally bound. Mr. Jensen, the document on file matches the one they brought. Until you file a fraud complaint, we can't remove them. They'd bypassed the law with a stack of fake paperwork. Sandra and I went to war. We discovered the notary they cited, Edward King, swore he'd never met me and his log had no entry for the transaction. Document fraud. The lawsuit they filed against me for defamation and public endangerment became their undoing, because it forced them to use the fraudulent lease as primary evidence. The hearing was less a trial and more an autopsy. Sandra exposed everything: the forged notary stamp, the fraudulent lease submitted for permits, and the internal HOA emails. Then came the coup de grace. Sandra demanded an audit of the Cedar Creek Wellness Initiative. Penelope, visibly crumbling in her beige power suit, was forced to admit that the initiative was a shell entity registered solely to her address, formed to fast-track projects, meaning to bypass every legal check the HOA rules had. Sandra even played the recording of Penelope, admitting they'd do what needs to be done to seize the land. The judge stopped the tape and looked straight at Penelope. The buzz in my spine told me the fight was over. The final ruling was total victory. All development was halted. The initiative was dissolved, and the court awarded me $190,000 in compensatory damages to be paid by Penelope personally and the HOA's general fund. I watched the local news coverage that night, feeling vindicated but not complete. The final delicious twist came 2 months later. Legal fees and fines bankrupted Penelope. Her mansion, the crown jewel of Cedar Creek, went into fast foreclosure. It was purchased by an LLC that immediately contracted with a mobile rental company, and that is how Ms. Penelope Shaw, former suburban queen and tyrant, ended up renting a tiny, beat-up travel trailer parked on a sliver of land right next to my parcel 77. Not on it, just adjacent. We didn't speak for weeks, but one evening, as I was trimming branches near the property line, I saw her, sitting on a folding chair outside her trailer. We made eye contact. Neither of us said a thing. I just lifted my beer in a slow, silent salute. She didn't acknowledge it, but she didn't look away either. That was enough. Now, a year later, the concrete is gone, and the shipping container is scrap metal. Every fall I host the unofficial Cedar Creek bonfire. No dues, no dress code. Just good food and neighbors who've realized that freedom tastes better than HOA-mandated conformity. And sometimes, late at night, I find a bottle of cider on my porch left without a note. I crack it open, raise it toward the trailer next door, and toast to the quiet. Sometimes losing everything is the only thing